and I am I'm the career services specialist with NPCA's new global reentry program. So I have the privilege of being here with you today and to talk to you a little bit about the mentoring program, just do an orientation here with you. We are recording this session for viewing later by other folks, so I just need to let everyone know that. And I will be joined a little bit later on. I should be joined in the very end of this presentation by Dr. Rhonda Anstead, who can give a little more information about her My Career Design Studio, which is one of the big tools that we're promoting right now that RPCVs have free access to. So I am excited to be here today to talk to you about the program, and also we'll be featuring two very special guests, two very seasoned mentors who've mentored a lot of people over the course of their lives. And I know that there's others out there as well. Ron, you came on, I think, and you've done thousands of RPCV resumes in particular, but helped in so many ways. So really, I'm looking at this training, not really a training, I'm looking at it as an orientation to kind of introduce the folks that may be newer to mentoring, to introduce them to those seasoned professionals and get some advice and insight from you. We'll be doing a panel in the end part, the second half of this. But for the first half, we'll go through a little bit of information. And I just want to start though by thanking you so much for your willingness to serve as a mentor, for signing up or wanting to learn more about what mentoring would be. We all have mentors in our lives, whether they're formal or informal, but doing something like this is an opportunity to give back to the RPCV community in particular, and especially right now at this time of extra need, right, with COVID and all of that. So it's a great thing that you're doing, and I'm excited to be here with you. I myself love the mentor relationship. I have some very important life mentors that have been with me for years and years, 30, 40 years, and have made a really big difference in my life. And I look to you all as that kind of opportunity. You have the opportunity to become a mentor or continue mentoring, because all of us, you will have mentored before too, whether it's formally or informally. And so I'm excited to connect you with the population that needs your assistance right now. So we will be, I myself, I did want to say before I started, I myself am an RPCV as well, having served in Ecuador from 1994 through 97. Do we have any Ecuador volunteers, RPCVs in the house? You can write it in the chat box here. And I know that my colleagues, Don or someone will, I don't have my chat box up right now because I'm sharing my screen and I want to make sure that I can focus on you all and the presentation. But we do also want to say we want your input and on what kind of assistance you want more of after this intro. We see this as a really 2 or 3 part orientation, right? I'm going to orient you to the mentoring process, to the how the process works in our program and such, and feature some great words of advice from people. Do a brainstorm together on resources that you like most. So start now if you can, just compiling in your head or making a list of what are some of the resources that you really like to use in a mentoring relationship, for those of you who have done mentoring, particularly with RPCVs, but with anyone, and start to make a list of that so that when we get to that part later on, we have a really rich dialogue, and we'll follow up and be able to share some of those to help folks. I'm always open to new resources and additional resources that can help. Why reinvent the wheel if there's a really great sample resume or guidance on interviewing? Just use what's there and augment it. That's what my philosophy is for mentoring and beyond. So I want to introduce you really quickly to the Global Reentry Program, which has 4 pillars, is how we describe it. Basically, I work largely in the career services pillar, so providing the career and transitional assistance to RPCVs and evacuees, right? during their time of need, right? And this is actually what my background has been in for many years. I recognize some of your names and such, of course, and you may recognize mine from my 12 plus years, most recently, working with the Peace Corps organization, Peace Corps itself, right? Headquarters, I ran the Career Center, which was in headquarters in DC. And as such, I used to do the career conferences, job fairs. We'd travel around the states and do those in different regions. So really, I'm getting out there, also doing individual one-on-one career, counseling, resumes. I'm actually showing my face here for a few minutes, so you can all see me as well. Loved that job. And, 12 years, I was very fortunate to be there as long as I was. And it does have to come to an end. And I never thought I would find a job that I would love so much and be able to really invest myself fully in my passion area of working with, job seekers. And here I am. Lo and behold, the Global Reentry Program was beginning to be founded and put together. There were changes in Peace Corps headquarters, and there's no longer really the Career Center there and many of the services that there used to be when I and my colleague Nick Crane were in those positions. So NPCA really took it up and said, this is needed, and let's make this work. And then COVID-19 happened, and boom, the mass evacuation of everyone, and it really it catapulted us into existence, if you will. And so my colleague Dan Baker and myself are really the ones that are in global reentry within NPCA. It's an honor to be on board working with, the great staff at NPCA and really being able to continue working in this area that I do so love. So as I said, I am mostly in the career services area, that pillar one. Pillar two is education. So it's really connecting volunteers with resources, with financial assistance. Some of the colleges, universities that offer financial assistance through the Coverdell Fellows Program, things like that. There are a lot that do offer it, so helping in that regard as well. And then the third one, the well-being, and many of you have probably already been involved in this area, providing the emotional support, peer support, tips and resources for how to best do that. There's been some really helpful webinars and such for the evacuees in particular. I mean, their whole world came to a an end as they knew it when they were evacuated with very little notice generally. So that's a really important pillar as well. And then the final one is the continuation of service. We've kind of changed that COS, the completion of service, right, or closure of service, to instead continuation of service. So thinking about ways that RPCVs can continue to be engaged and work toward, the ideals of Peace Corps. And I know that many of you, the seasoned ones in particular, have been doing that for years, whether it's through advocacy, through, mentoring, all of those, just being involved, staying involved with NPCA and with your countries of service and things like that. So that's the four pillars really. And, this mentoring program, mentoring as it is going to spill over in these different areas, right? I think the design of, the mentoring program, the bulk of what you may be doing, or at least a good majority, will likely be that job search oriented type, right? I need a job. I don't know what to do for a job. My resume is awful. I need some help with it. Things like that. So you probably will be doing quite a bit, but I think they do bleed over, and certainly there might be people who, are interested in, pursuing their education. So it's good to know about the pillars and what kinds of resources we have online. And we'll be covering the resources a little bit later on as well. So, so let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I want to first really talk about defining a mentor or mentoring, right? There's a lot of ways to define it probably, but I love this quote right here because I really think that it speaks to the heart of mentoring, right? It really is, someone who allows you to see the hope inside yourself. And I think that's really applicable right now, right? With the evacuees and RPCVs in these challenging times, hope is so important to hold on to, right? That positivity and being hopeful. You've been through a lot, you can do it, and having someone who can just remind them of that and be there, for when they need to, whether it's vent or when they need assistance. So that's how I really define it, but I'm curious as to how some of you might define it. If you can enter into the chat box, just enter whether, like, how do you define mentoring, if you have a different definition. And I have the chat box open here now. Let's see. Don't all jump at once, but how do you define mentoring, or what are the characteristics of a good mentor even you could put in? I would sub hope for possibilities. Yeah, that's great, Donna. I like that. So instead of, so you would instead say a mentor is someone who allows you to see the possibilities in yourself. That's great. Or maybe it's hope and possibilities in yourself. Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Anyone else? Keep someone accountable for reaching their goals. Edward, great. We have that. We'll be talking about that a little bit later as well, right? That accountability, right? In a non-judgmental way, right? So they're not scared to come back to you if they didn't get what they said they were going to get done. Wonderful. Helping someone discover their potential and how to achieve it. Lawrence, great. I like that. That's a good one as well. So we definitely have some good definitions here. That's great. So let's move on and look at a little more about what is a mentor, right? And a mentor is a lot of things to a lot of people, and people are looking for different things in mentors, as we already mentioned. But a mentor is generally an experienced and trusted advisor, right? There's somebody that has knowledge or expertise that they can then share with the rest of the population, or with their mentee, right? In particular. So somebody who is experienced, who can kind of help show them the ropes or things like that. What it's not is a therapist, right? You are not a professional therapist, or most of you are not. I'm sorry, I should rephrase that. Some of you might be therapists, but mentoring is not therapy, right? In some ways, I think RPCVs may look at it as that, or there might be times where, they're, really going through a tough time and they might share that with you, right? So there might be a little bleed over, but it really is not, it's not a therapist, right? It's somebody who, you trust and you feel that you can, share with and can help you hold accountable for goals, as you've already said. Now, interesting. How do you distinguish mentor from a coach? This depends. Some people use coach and mentor as interchangeable, but in the general industry, a coach, like a career coach or a life coach, right, is a relationship that is a paid type of relationship. There's a fee for service, just like a therapist, right? And generally it's a longer type of relationship that you have. Now, sometimes mentors can go on forever. As I said, one of my mentors is from 30 plus years ago and we're still close. But the relationship where you are really interacting quite regularly generally is longer with a coach, right, as well, versus a mentor. So do other folks have thoughts on differentiating mentor from coach? That's how I generally think of it. As. Okay. So while you're writing in the chat box, let's go ahead. A mentor is also an ally, right? And that's what RPCVs and mentees in general really need. They need somebody who can be an ally, who's on their side, right? Who can maintain that positive attitude even in times of adversity, right? Because that's hard to do for the RPCV, the mentee. Sometimes they just are really, they're really frustrated. Does anyone, can anyone say any more in the chat box or anything in terms of, like, in addition, what else a mentor might be other than what's on this grid? So if there's anything else that you think a mentor is, it's not the one-way relationship, it's a two-way relationship. You give and take, right? And you can actually learn from your mentee just like they learn from you. And I think in particular, people, those of us who, have more experience, are seasoned, professionals, are AKA older as well, right? All of us. A lot of times, when I'm mentoring someone who's significantly younger, they're in the generation where they're just coming out, they're in their 20s, they are all about everything technology. Like, they have it down. And boy, they can mentor me on aspects of certain technologies. Oh, in fact, our intern just taught me how to do Slack. I had never heard of Slack. And that's this whole, it's an app, and she walked me through it and was great. So my point is, it can be a two-way relationship too. You can give and get. Let's see, Jennifer in the chat box wrote, a mentor can be a role model, a person who asks questions and doesn't have all the answers. Jennifer, that is so important. Being that role model, yes, but you don't have to take the pressure off yourself. You do not have to know all the answers. You won't know all the answers, and that's okay. It's not going to make you look weak or less skilled or lesser of a mentor if you don't know something. Nobody expects somebody to know absolutely everything. But how do you approach things when you don't know something? Let's Google, get some more information. Are you interactive with seek out professionals who do, refer them to people who might be able to answer that question for them. It doesn't mean that all the answers have to come just from you. So thank you, Jennifer, for bringing that up. I think that really is a cheerleader. Yes, Matthew, a cheerleader, the encourager. That's an absolute. I should have put that in my graphic, right? You are their biggest advocate or cheerleader oftentimes in helping them stay motivated and positive and moving forward with things. So that's great. Awesome. Here I just have another graphic that I like, mentoring being, that motivating. We've already covered a lot of these things, providing guidance, right? When they ask for guidance, right? Skills, you can share some of the skills that you have or expertise and teach them things in that regard as well as part of a mentoring program. Advice, obviously, is very, very much a part of that. And mentoring them to success, right? How can, helping them achieve their goals and get that job that they want, or move in that direction and help them to redefine, realistic expectations and how to go forth. And then stepping into their potential. You're ultimately helping them step into their potential. And that's really key as well. So great. So I want to talk a moment about RPCVs versus the evacuees, because, readjustment's hard anyway, right? It's difficult. I don't know if any of you had a very easy readjustment, you came back and everything was fabulous and it was all great. Put your name, put yes or easy in the chat box. And I venture to say we may find somebody, but it's not very often that I find somebody who actually would answer that question truthfully, saying yes. It is difficult. You come back from being in an environment where you become known, you're part of that community, right? And suddenly you're thrust into this, it's the readjustment, which is more difficult many times because you don't expect it. It's like, well, I know this country. I've lived this country for 20 whatever years, or however many years you had before you went to Peace Corps. So I know this, no problem. But you come back and the issue is, and it's not a problem, it's a great thing, but you've changed. Your cultural identity has changed, and it's really difficult. And I'm preaching to the choir here. You all as RPCVs know this, right? So it is difficult. You think about your own reverse culture shock and not being understood, feeling unheard when you're talking to friends and such, that pressure to move ahead and get a job when you're still readjusting. All of those things are really difficult, period. But then let's throw in, for the evacuees, in addition to that, which is difficult already, you have trauma. Let's face it, premature ending to their service, right? Their service ended unexpectedly early, with most of the time a 1 day, maybe 2 days notice, not enough time to wrap up, to say goodbye, no despedidas, the goodbye parties, none of that. So there really was no closure. So they're back here in this country. They come, not only that, they come back and they return to, a nation in crisis, more so oftentimes than what their country they were serving is, and they feel more at risk here. So of course you have anger, there was a lot of, in the beginning, people were very angry about being evacuated. And I get it. I would not have wanted to be evacuated either, but they had to do what they had to do to get them out. The borders closed. I think after the fact, people have, many have changed their opinions on that. But regardless, it was hard. And then coming back to social isolation, social distancing, and that's hard. You can't even hug, friends and go out in person. Everything's Zoom, if anything. So you're kind of trapped in this house wherever you are. You're, thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Like that's an extra stress. Absolutely. And then the tanked economy, right? Of course, the COVID-19 tanked economy, which makes it even harder to get a job and move forward. So obviously people, the evacuees, and I think some RPCVs in general, they really go through the stages of grief, right? Just like loss, when you lose a person, when somebody dies, or their Peace Corps service dies unexpectedly or disappears unexpectedly. It's the same type of cycle, right? So that whole, like, the shock and denial, kind of numb, and folks were there, and there's no time period for when people go through all of these, right? No two people are exactly the same. So, and they could spiral. I like this graphic the best because it kind of talks about that whole, how they might make progress and then they go back up toward, it's not just a linear, you move through the stages, you kind of circle around some. So the shock and denial, anger, there can be some depression, detachment. I know with the COVID-19 evacuations, they did give, I believe it was extra, what do you call it? The ability to go to a therapist. They give you vouchers, and they gave, I think, extra ones for people, rightfully so. And so you have that stage, and then that dialogue, and that's where I think a lot of people are at that now, where they're kind of, okay, I need to reach out to others. I need to think about what's going, what's coming, and they're feeling a little more hopeful. Many of them are, and some maybe not. But meeting them where they are, right? But just wanted you all to have that kind of graphic for them as well. So the important thing for you is to meet them where they are. If they're still in the, anger and all of that, or the shock and denial or depression, you don't want to overload them with a task of a list of, you need to do this, 10 things before our next meeting. No, you want to really, right, ratchet it back and meet them where they are and help support them in the best way you can. So any other questions coming up or comments in the chat box here? Okay, great. That's fine. And oh, Charlie just shares, yeah, having been an older volunteer, reentry wasn't as difficult as it might have been, but the things that bugged him, still bug me after. Exactly. It depends on where you are in your own life cycle as well, when you do Peace Corps. So just know that you want to meet them where they are. I like this quote a lot. A mentor is someone who sees more talent and ability within you than you see in yourself, and helps you bring it out of you. To me, it goes back to that potential aspect, right? And helping them realize and step into their full potential. Okay. Great. So I want to share some resources and such, and then we are going to move on to the panelists and really have them be able to share their experience, and we're going to brainstorm some ideas here. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of what other kinds of trainings are available as well. So for the mentoring resources, on our website, just peacecorpsconnect.org, if you go to the global reentry page, there's the health and wellness part, that page, which has some really good information to help people, if you're not as familiar with, like, oh, if they're maybe needing more assistance than what you as a mentor can provide, there can be some additional resources there as well that you could share with your mentee. And then the global reentry resources, there's the Your Career page, which is shown here. There's also the webinars that we've done, which are all on the NPCA's YouTube page. It's under the Global Reentry playlist. And so you can listen to or refer them to any of those. We've already done a lot of things such as, resumes and interviewing, federal application process, things like that. You'll see the whole list if you go there. And then there's also, there's my podcast, which we just started a new podcast series. my first podcast ever. It's called Jobs with Jody, and we record it every Wednesday. We do a live recording on Wednesdays, and then we, edit it. It gets edited and music added and all of that to make it more of an audio podcast. So you're welcome to participate in any of those as well, and to encourage or refer your mentees, your assigned mentee or mentees to that as well, okay? And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention some of the resources that still do exist on the peacecorps.gov website. If you go to peacecorps.gov/careers, it will take you to the page, the home page, and then you'll have links to CareerLink, which is if you remember, CareerLink is the jobs board, which has hundreds. I mean, generally, I looked at it about a month ago, and it was about almost 1,000 jobs that were posted, and of that, there were about 400 that were federal. Now, within the last 2 weeks, when I looked, I think it was more like there were maybe 500 jobs or 600 jobs. That's still a lot of jobs, right? And it could be more vacancies than just one per post, because oftentimes they'll post for an NCE vacancy and they might be hiring multiple people. So lots of jobs. So again, peacecorps.gov/careerlink is that's the jobs board. And these employers are the ones that really like Peace Corps volunteers, right? They know RPCVs and know what great workers they are, so they seek them out through that free jobs board. So and then my career design studio, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and that's Dr. Rhonda Anstead's, and she is going to hopefully be able to get on here before the end of this to answer any questions that you might have on that as well.
Jody, I'm actually here. So
oh, Rhonda, hello. Perfect timing.
Yes.
Well, goodness, I am going to defer to you then, because she is the expert and is a career coach and has career consultant and does a great job with the My Career Design Studio, and is a consultant with the NPCA. And we're just really thrilled that you could be here. And that was perfect timing. How did you know? Right at the moment.
Thank you. Yes, my bat senses, my spider senses have been tingling. So,
great, thank you.
So yeah, so good to meet all of you, and thank you so much for agreeing to be mentors for this process. And I just want to talk very briefly about a tool that is at your fingertips as well as the fingertips for your mentees. So this is a program that I designed that was really focused on being able to give best practices and career coaching in a self-paced and a gamified format, so that people are motivated to do some of the hard work that's going to set them up for career success later. And so what I mean by that is some of the self-reflection, some career decision making, making sure that you are having a fit with your chosen career, and that that it works for you, it builds on your strengths, really set yourself up for success. So there's over 30 different career related activities, as well as an additional 10 or 12 coaching activities, positive psychology. And so there's a whole lot of range that can walk an EPCV and RPCV through the career coaching process. So while you are there as a cheerleader and a guide, this can give them and you some steps on actions that they can take, activities that'll lead them towards the kind of job they really want. Yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Great.
And so basically what I recommend at this point is to have your EPCVs, especially those who don't know exactly what they want to do, to sign up for a career guide. And that gives them access to My Career Design Studio, but it's also an interactive email guide that gives them coaching tips and tricks. I also recommend that you sign up for it so that you understand the tool, but it can also give you some really good ideas. And so one thing is about how to reframe failure so that it isn't something that's demotivating, but actually turns your sense of not making things happen, to a challenge, and how to celebrate your little mini successes. So there's a whole lot of information in the career guide in addition to the Career Design Studio. So we are planning on doing a training. We haven't decided on the date, but a training for the mentors on how to understand and utilize my Career Design Studio. And so that'll be something that you can attend. And you can also, if they're working through my Career Design Studio, you can kind of look at what they've done. They can share over Zoom. You can, see the strengths that they've identified, help them to see how they can leverage their strengths, and also learn some of these career coaching best practices. And like I said, there's also activities around dealing with depression, overwhelm, a feeling of being stuck, or demotivation. So, it really is hopefully a very robust resource that, so that you don't have to regret when we're talking about.
Oops, I'm going to try to mute everyone's. Please mute your audio, and I'm going to go in and try to mute it on this end as well. Better?
Okay, yes, that is much better. Thank you, Jody. And
still trying to get it all done.
Yeah, exactly. Our goal is not to run people off here.
And Rhonda, can I just mention one thing? I want to say, just as a testimonial, I actually had been meaning to go through Rhonda's thing just so I would be able to talk about it better and know what it's like. And I finally did it, and it was so simple and yet powerful, because it would send these automatic reminders to me, not too often, but things like, okay, your next step, and are you ready for your next step? And then you put in, what is your goal? What are you looking to do? And then it checks back with you. So you have somebody, you have this program helping to hold you accountable, where it's like, oh, that's right, I meant to do that. Shoot, I've got to do that today. And it doesn't, it's non-judgmental, and it's humorous. I love your approach to it, Rhonda, because it interjects some humor, and we all need that when we're going through,
Absolutely.
job search and, stressful areas and times in our lives. So.
Yeah, I mean, it really is designed to be a very positive approach, and to give a lot of motivation and structure, to take this huge thing of finding a job to, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the next 5 minutes. And then I can let it go for today. Tomorrow I'm going to spend another 5 or 15 minutes. So it does keep you going. So I really encourage you to encourage your mentees to sign up for this, and please feel free to integrate it into your work if you find it helpful. And like I said, we'll be doing some training on it soon so that you can get a deeper understanding. So I know we've got a lot more to talk about, so I'm going to turn it back to you, Jody.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Rhonda. I really appreciate that. And again, that training, that will be announced. It will probably be sometime in August. But that will be announced, and you're welcome to attend that, if you would like. And again, if you start it yourself first, so you kind of get that feel of how it works, that can be really helpful. Okay, so I have a few tips for successful mentoring that are here really quickly before we go into more of our what we want to spend the rest of the time on, really the mentors and brainstorming. But really thinking about clarifying and setting realistic expectations. What are they looking for? Try to define that up front, because that's going to be most helpful to you and to them in moving forward and in the right direction. And that might change. They might start with one thing, and most likely they'll either achieve that or reassess. No, I really don't want that. Let's look at this. And there's no wrong answer there. So set up the logistics and expectations, up front, right? So what frequency are you able to provide? You're dedicating yourself to doing this, but it doesn't mean that this should be a full-time job. You are the one who knows how much you have to give. So is it 1 hour a week? Is it less? Is it more? You can decide on that as well. Focus on their perceived needs. It's not about you doing, you telling them what they should do, right? It's what do they feel they need and what's their next step, and help them with that. We already talked about holding the mentees accountable, but don't be judgmental, right? So they may not be able to, accomplish what they thought they were going to. Provide, solicited advice, don't be that, where you're just, I'm going to give you the advice and you need to do this. Don't be offended if they don't implement it. That's not on you, it's on them. So it's their choice ultimately, right? Respecting each other's time, if they're not respecting your time, maybe they're late or they're, whatever, you can certainly at some point, say, I really want to help you. And in order to do that, I need to be able to start at whatever time, because that's the only, whatever, that's where it works and in my schedule and things like that. And it's a give and take relationship, like we said, and it's also, you can learn from them. Reassess your goals as you go on. And lastly, have fun with it, make it enjoyable. These are good people and you're a good person. So we're just connecting you both. And speaking of which, that is the connection. And it has taken much longer than expected. My colleague Dan has single-handedly done a really, matching and such, and just taking into account, tried to really match people that had certain interests as much as they can, right? We had over 350 people apply for a mentor, register for a mentor, and we had about 300 that offered to mentor. So we are still looking for a few, trying to fill those gaps. If any of you are in a position in your life where you're fortunate enough to have extra time and you would like to do that, please drop me a line or drop us a line, careers@peacecorpsconnect.org, or me directly at jody@peacecorpsconnect.org. We'd be happy to connect you, but look for those though in the very near future. I think Dan had thought he was going to be finalizing the first round part. There's always people coming and going too, which complicates it, but getting those out, I think, by next week. So that's exciting. Okay. All right, so here we go. We are at the point here, and I want to spend, as we said, a lot more time on this, the conversation with our seasoned mentors, both Don Drock and Barbara, and it's Kamara, right? That's how you pronounce the, yes, okay. Both of you have served actually in Liberia, and Don, I know personally from having him participate in many of our RPCV events, trainings when I was in Peace Corps headquarters. He's just been the eternal, just a networking guru and someone who just has so much heart and so much to give. And so it's just been an honor and privilege to work with him over the years. And when I was talking to Don about you, Barbara, he indicated you are way more seasoned in mentoring than he is, and you just have such a background. So we're excited to have you both here and both able to share a bit. So what I'd like to do is really have you start by introducing yourself, and maybe Barbara, would you like to start and tell us a little bit more about yourself and what drew you to mentoring in the first place?
Okay, well, thanks everyone. I do prefer Sia as my first name, which means the first girl. And,
okay, great.
And Barbara was the name I was given when I was born, but my husband was from Sierra Leone, and they gave me the name Sia, which means the first girl, so I like that. I was a volunteer in Liberia, 1963 to 65. And I'm originally from North Carolina, from Wilmington, North Carolina. And I graduated with a degree in physics and mathematics, never intended to be in the field of education, but went to Peace Corps, and my total career trajectory was changed, and I ended up in early childhood. I was amongst the first return volunteers to recruit, because there were very few volunteers of color, and there still we are a limited number. So I served on a team in the Northeast, and then I served on the Black College recruiting. I've had a mentor since I was 3 years old. My grandfather had a business, and at 3, I understand that I would be there with him, and my big thing was give me your money. And by the time I was 16, I was able to run the entire business, and then went on off to college career working at the government level. Another thing I said I wasn't going to do, but I worked for a governor, I worked for President Carter, I worked for 4 mayors in DC, and for the last 10 years, I've been a consultant in Liberia, where I have been a mentor and a coach to a number of people, but certainly people within the Ministry of Education. So I've had this, like I said, started with the mentors at 3. My mom helped me because she'd take me with her when she was campaigning for people. And so I became politically involved when I was about 6 or 7, and then have had mentors all of my life. And even when I served in very high level positions, I had something called the kitchen cabinet, and they were mentors to me because it's very challenging to do these political positions. So, I've learned a lot from people who have mentored me. So I'll stop there.
Great, Sia. Thank you so much. And Don, can you go ahead and give a brief introduction of yourself as
Yeah,
well, and what drew you to mentoring?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Like Barbara, like Sia, I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Liberia, 71 to 73. In terms of how I became a mentor here in this community, when I retired from federal service about 10 years ago, I set up a little strategic plan for myself. I never got past the 3 goals, but the 3 goals were be happy, be healthy, and be useful. And I used those goals to try and figure out what I was going to do in this time of life. And fortunately, at that time, I met Jody, and she gave me the opportunity to start doing some workshops at the career conferences for RPCVs. So I felt doing that kind of work would at least make me happy and useful. Not sure about healthy, but so that's how I got involved in it. And then I've stayed with it all these years. My focus more recently is with Friends of Liberia, working with the young volunteers who have just come back recently. What else? Just in terms of my own, one thing I do as a mentor is I try to use examples from my own life and career experiences. And I'll give you 3 examples just to give you some background about myself. One thing I tell the mentees is to build on your Peace Corps experience. Put a lot of value in what you did in the Peace Corps. And the example I use is when I applied for graduate school after Peace Corps, I wanted to go into education. I had a degree in political science. Had absolutely no education credits, but Boston College, the dean there said, well, if you could teach 2 years in the Peace Corps, you can start a graduate program. So it was based on my Peace Corps experience that I got into Boston College with an assistantship. The other thing is take a risk. When I finished grad school, I was planning to teach in Boston, but I got a telephone interview in the Virgin Islands and packed a bag and went down to St. Croix for 5 years. Turned out to be a great career move. And the third thing I tell them is that be flexible and be open-minded. When I came back to Washington, after 4 months of literally pounding the pavements in Washington in those days, I got a job at the Government Accountability Office, a place I'd never even heard of, and ended up spending 28 years there. I met my wife that way. It was just a terrific career. So that's a little bit of my background and some of the sort of the ideas I try to share with the mentees.
Wonderful, thank you. And Don, you've already answered a little bit of our next question, so I'm just going to go directly to Sia to see if you have some additional thoughts on this, and that would be, what would you say is the recommended frame of mind that you take as a mentor,
Well,
that can help you be most effective in your role?
Well, first thing is that I'm in this process because I'm a learner, a lifelong learner. And I think that's so important for people to understand. I am an absolute big time risk taker. And so I certainly agree with Don that, helping people to understand that you have to take risks. You have to do things. Like I said, I never thought I'd be in the field of education, but here it is. I've done a lot in many places, and not only here across the US, but, in Africa as well. And then, I think also the importance of connecting. Don is definitely a master dot connector, and I think we both consider ourselves dot connectors. That's really important. Meeting people, getting information, because you never know when it is that person that might lead you to the next opportunity that you have. And mentors also are tend to be change agents. And I don't generally talk with people about that right away, but I said, if you been in the Peace Corps, you have become a change agent. You may not put that label on it, but you certainly have. So I try to bring all of those things as I'm working with people, but also I understand that I have 2 ears and I need to use them a lot in working with people to hear what it is they have to say, encouraging them to not necessarily just be vulnerable, but be willing to share.
Great, Sia, thank you. And that reminds me of the saying, what is it? You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Right.
Listen more. Okay, great. Let's go to the next question. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what's the biggest challenge that you've faced as a mentor, and how have you, resolved that? What do you find is the biggest challenge overall?
Well, I'll use the example of when I started 10 years ago in Liberia, serving as the mentor and coach for the assistant minister. And what I really had to do was to help her see that you already know how to do this job. And helping people to overcome their own fears, that's the real challenge. And so that's when I had to apply. We're going to walk hand in hand. We'll do things. We'll do read alouds. We'll do things that she thought that, well, I'm an adult, I shouldn't have to do those. But she learned so much and became a fantastic administrator and still is a powerhouse, even though she's no longer in that particular position. So I think working with people to overcome their insecurities and maybe fears.
Wonderful. Don, do you have anything to add to that with regard to biggest challenge and how you've overcome that?
Not really. All my mentoring has really been with the Return Peace Corps volunteer community. And to be honest, I really haven't had any challenges at all with them. I mean, they're very willing, they're very eager, easy to work with. And as you said in your last slide, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. Well, that's great. Maybe you can weigh in first on something else that goes along with that. How do you go about helping a stuck individual move forward toward their goals? I mean, RPCBs are great people, and you said you haven't really had challenges, but certainly you've had RPCBs who felt stuck and not sure how to, and you needed to help them in some way. What has helped you? How do you go about that process?
One thing that's helpful is actually something you used to teach in the career conferences, Jody, and that is how do you translate your Peace Corps experience back here? So I would spend time with people in that kind of situation, just having them talk more about what they did in the Peace Corps and what challenges did they face there, how did they overcome them, what were their successes, and so forth, and then have them try and build on that.
That's a great idea. I think most RPCBs are very comfortable talking about their Peace Corps service, and they love talking with people who want to hear about that. So that sounds like a great tip.
I had to run and let somebody in my house, so I have missed like a couple of minutes.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I think, why don't we move on to, your favorite resources? What are your favorite career resources that you like, online ones and print, whatever, resources for people who are doing the job search?
Well, I guess mostly, Jody, I've relied on the resources that you provided during the career conferences, the networking, the resume writing, the interviewing, the elevator speech, all those things.
Yep.
And they're, as you say, they're now available, I think, on the Peace Corps Connect Global Reentry Program. I've also just lately started going online for online training. There's an Irish company called Allison Online Learning. And I decided I better brush up myself on resume reviews and that kind of stuff. So I took a 3-hour course there about that. And there are tons of online courses, and certainly Rhonda's program sounds like it has that kind of stuff also.
Great. Was the Allison online learning program, was that free, or was that one that you paid for?
No, that's the beauty of it. It's free unless you want a certificate.
Nice.
And they've got millions of students all over the world. It's a very successful program.
Oh, that's wonderful. And that speaks also to, during this time, I think, for you all to know as a resource. There's so many online trainings from major universities, you know, like very distinguished universities that are free. And there are other ones that are free and then you pay only if you want the certificate. And oftentimes you don't need that. So taking advantage of some of the downtime, you can work with your clients to, you know, help them to investigate and find free trainings on a variety of things that can help them increase their skill base and all of those things as well. So I'm asking that, or I did ask that the folks that are in the live virtual audience to drop any recommendations they had for resources, just to put those in the chat box. So thanks, Don, for putting yours in. Anyone else, if you can drop resources, that would be great. What I think we're going to do is take what we get here, but when we do our follow-up email to this message, we'll probably include a Google Doc as well that you can just, Google Form that you can complete, so you can insert what are your favorite resources. We really want to know, because we want to compile these so we have a more, you know, a plethora of resources that, you know, maybe other mentors can tap into to help them be able to do the best job they can without having to invest a lot of extra time.
Yeah.
So, so just continue dropping those in the chat box. And FYI, if any of you want to keep the chat box, it's very easy to do. Before you leave, you need to go into the chat box. And at the bottom right, there will be the 3 dots with the little square around it. Just push on that, just click there, and it will allow you to save chat. And what it does is, if you're on a laptop, it'll save the chat to your Zoom folder, which is automatically added to your PC when you download the app. So, and that's where you'll find it. Okay. Any other, I guess, you know, we're getting close to the hour, and I definitely want to honor everyone's time. So as people are continuing to drop in their, you know, favorite, you know, resources, and I will mention one of mine. I love the Muse. The Muse Daily, I think they have really good, if I don't know something or I want new resources, I'll Google it and I'll put in, you know, whatever, job search, you know, or resume writing tips, the Muse. I love their guidance. I tend to agree with about 90%, which is almost unheard of in the in the career arena and such. So, but while people are dropping those in, I'm just going to ask if if either of you, Sia and Don, if you can speak for a moment on like how you get started with a new mentee. Do you have a typical, you know, intake process or any kind of an outline that you follow when beginning with a new mentor to assess where they are and where they want to be? And if so, I'd love to hear. We'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, what I like to do is to ask them to just tell me a brief story about themselves, their lives, kind of where they've been, and to identify 3 things they've been successful at in the last year, and then talk about 3 things they'd like to be doing in the next 5 years to 10 years. And so that it's getting to know people, and then I can share some things too, and to ask them to, you know, think about a list of things they really want to they'd like to get done. That's usually in the second conversation, because you're taking a little time getting to know each other. Sometimes, depending on who it is, you may be able to do all of that in one conversation, but beginning to build the trust is so critical. And I found that, particularly as I've had to work in these international governments, that if you don't do a good job of building trust, they never get it, and they don't begin to do the things that they need to do for themselves and to help themselves to move forward.
Great, that's wonderful. And Don, do you have anything to, you know, add to that whole area before we open it up? I want to open up the last at least 5 minutes here for questions from the audience. So if folks do have questions for Don and Sia, just drop them into the chat box and we will ask as many as we can. I am certainly willing to stay on afterwards for a few minutes, but I totally respect people have busy schedules and need to get going, and so you can certainly drop off at any time as well, and we will be in touch more with some follow-up materials and some of those resources that people have shared, and we'll go from there. Okay. And we will also be, when we follow up with you, we'll be talking about we're going to do a session on resume review tips. We have that actually already scheduled it's in July. I think it's Thursday the 23rd. It's that week anyway. And we'll put that link to register for that in there, so you can get more information on that as well. And we might tap Randy for some of his guidance on resume writing, since he's done so much of it with RPCVs. So Don, did you have any closing remarks you wanted to make, whether related to the final question on like intake and how you get started with them, or just in general?
I would just say Barbara said it very well. I would just add to that it's really about a relation, building a strong relationship with the person. And of course, trust is a big part of that. And the only other thing I would say is that as mentors, we should know our limitations. And one of your slides covered that we're not counselors. There are certain things we can't do, we shouldn't do. So just know your limitations and don't feel like you have to do it all.
That's really good parting words of guidance there. Let's see if we do have Rhonda. Let's see if we have some folks, some final questions that are in here. Are there any questions that have come up that you've seen in the chat box? I'll scroll through here a little bit.
Not that I've seen, but I do want to build on what Don just said. That one of the things that that Jody and I are developing is a network of pro bono career counselors. So if you do have someone, if you are working with someone that is beyond your level of expertise and that they do need some career counseling components, I'm going to put my email in the chat box, but you'll also get this information through our follow-up email that Jody is going to send out. And so this is a process that again is being developed, and we don't necessarily expect there to be a high demand, but we want you to know that that is available. And so again, if you're working with someone who's struggling, with some depression or who has a very complex set of career issues, then reach out to me, and we'll see if we can't find someone who can basically complement the work that you're doing and add on to it in a way that helps them to overcome whatever obstacles they're facing.
And maybe Rhonda can just drop her email in the chat box as well. Is it the Gmail, the Rhonda?
No, I'm going to give my professional one.
Okay, sorry.
So that'd be
Great.
Jody?
Yes.
I'd just like to pick up on a comment that Donna Wilson said. Are we going to have a Google form or something like that where we can reach out to each other? It makes me think that, even mentors need mentors. So
yeah, right. I love that idea. And coming from the federal sector for so long, I would need to say, but right now I'm not in that. I'm in the nonprofit. So I believe if everyone is okay with sharing that information, we may be able to have a spreadsheet that does have, and what we'll probably need to do is in our follow-up email, Rhonda, to include, if you, unless you, whatever, otherwise, please let us know if you are not okay with us including your name in this Google Doc, and then maybe we can do it that way. And I'm also working on updating many of the resources for the job search, which, you were alluding to, Don. I want to get some new resources in there. So I'm going to also share that eventually. That won't be, this week certainly, but to keep them all up to date.
Yeah, we've got some, some people have suggested Google Groups for that. I mean, there's a lot of online forums, even a private LinkedIn group.
Sure.
So there's multiple ways that that we can keep it private, but also keep it accessible and keep it decentralized. One of the things that Jody and I are very clear about is that we do not want to be the sticking point. We
can't be.
We want you to be able to share information and resources with each other as much as possible. So what we do is we get started and then we hand it off to you, and you do what you need to with it.
Yeah, and just having, and I guess what I would need to do too is check and see if that even would be a possibility. Even, the whole PII and sensitivity to that is it's so much an issue. So, perhaps it would work better to, have one of those groups started. And I certainly could send the invite to everyone because I have that. I have everyone's info. If somebody would maybe want to start a group on, one of those forums that was mentioned, we could certainly, direct others to it. And then I think that would be a really great group for you all to be able to support each other. And, hey, I have a client that I'm really working on this with, who, that would be awesome. I like that. So wonderful. All right. If there are not any other comments or questions for folks, I realize that it's just after the hour, and I want to, as I said, respect everyone's time. So I would like to thank our panelists in particular. Thank you so much, Sia and Don, for being here and sharing, your advice, expertise. I know a lot of you on the line were weighing in, and you have a lot of experience as well, and I appreciate that. Jennifer, Randy, there's, several of you who were, very helpful in the chat box as well. Rhonda, always a pleasure. Thank you so much as well for being on and coming on at the perfect time. So I think we will sign off right now. I'm actually going to at least stop the recording, and then I will be fine staying on afterwards. So thank you everyone for coming, and have a great day, and please be in touch with us if you do have questions. careers@peacecorpsconnect.org. Again, careers@peacecorpsconnect.org. Thanks for coming today. Enjoy.